Hello and welcome back to a little bit of time traveling. Some months ago I did already a video where we took a look at a game that I played about 4 years ago, or even a little bit more than 4 years ago, where I for the first time played in the Master Division of the International Championship. And today we are even going a little bit further back in time because in my second season that I played in the International Championship, only a few months after I discovered the game through the ages, I had the honor to play against Vlaada, the designer of the game. And at this point, I didn't know how special that honor was, because to my knowledge, that was the only instance where Vlaada joined one of the public tournaments. So the odds that I just at this point was in the gold division and then out of the 8 gold division got seeded into a group with Vlaada. I really got a little bit lucky there, and yeah, it was definitely great for me to play against the actual designer of the game, especially because I of course really like the game through the ages, but I'm also a big fan of the game Mage Knight, and that game is also designed by Vlaada, so he's definitely one of my favorite game designers, and having the opportunity to play against him was definitely very great for me. Now, and to give a little bit of context, I discovered the game of Through the Ages at the beginning of 2020. In March 2020, I started with joining my first tournament. I played the International Championship in the Silver Division, where I managed to win my group very decisively. Then I played a season in the Intermezzo Championship, and then we are now at this point where I for the first time played in the Gold Division of the International Championship, and where I then faced against Vlaada. And at this point, I haven't had a lot of experience yet, but I have already played the game for some months. I watched a lot of content. I got really engaged with the game, and now I think it will be quite interesting to take a look at how I played my moves back then, but of course also especially how the designer of the game Vlaada played his moves back then. So I hope you are interested to see how this game will be going. That game was the third or the last one of the games that I played against Vlaada, and at this point it was already clear that it could be quite a decisive game for which of us at the end might be able to win the group. So it was a very important game. Marek P at the end, or Marek P, if we are talking in English, was at the end not involved in the fight for promotion, but for me and for Vlaada, yeah, it could turn out to, or it was a very important game to decide which one of us will win the group. Alright, but now without further ado, let's start with taking a look at this game now almost about 5 years ago. It was played in the early summer of 2020, and now we are in summer 2025. So 5 years ago this game was played, and now let's start with taking a look at it. And first of all, we can take a look at the leaders and wonders. We can see that there is some theater synergy with Marlene Dietrich, Chaplin, and Hollywood being in H3. There's also Bach in H2 as well as Shakespeare. We have also some science and lab leaders with Sid Meier, Einstein, and Marie Curie. There is Churchill and the Manhattan Project for the military. There's no Gandhi. There is the Red Cross, and there's also Mandela. Then in H2 we have the Suez Canal and James Cook, so definitely some colonization payoff. We have James Watt, but no railroad. We have no ocean liner service, but there is Maria Theresa. There's the Harvard College. There's also Darwin. Robespierre is the only military action leader. Joan of Arc is the only military action leader in H1. Genghis Khan can help with the strength. And then there's Michelangelo together with Machu Picchu and St. Peter's Basilica, so maybe there is some potential there. And also Gutenberg, but no Leonardo. Eleanor Isabella can maybe work nicely for colonization. There's also the Universitas and the Great Wall as potentially very interesting wonders. Vlaada is playing in the first position in this game, and he starts with taking the Rome roads, a very, very solid wonder. I think maybe nowadays in his position I would probably aim towards going for Confucius, just because I think he's a very strong leader. And now, especially if maybe Alex is taken away, it could happen that at this next turn there's no leader available for one civil action, and that, especially with the Rome roads already costing a lot of civil actions, could be a bit problematic. So I think I would maybe aim towards going for Confucius, and then the Rome roads will probably be taken away, but maybe the Colossus could still be there, who is quite a strong wonder with the Suez Canal and James Cook being in the game. So I think that would be my preference, but the Rome roads of course being a very solid wonder, and with that a very solid pick. When we take a look at my pick, we can see that indeed times have maybe changed because I will be going for Colosseum and Urban Growth, and I will just be ignoring Confucius here, which I nowadays definitely wouldn't do, but there was a time where Confucius wasn't really that highly valued by a lot of players, and I mean, I watched some content, I tried to learn the game, and at this point, I think Confucius was just considered to be one of the weaker leaders for whatever reason, and it took me and also the others, or some of the others, there were definitely some players who maybe already evaluated him as a strong leader, but I and some others needed a little bit of time to discover how strong Confucius actually is, how easily he gives you a lot of science and how beneficial that early science can be to just get your economy going a lot quicker. But at this point I didn't really like him, and so here I went for the Colosseum, which I at this point valued a lot higher than I do it nowadays, and then maybe I was hoping, for example, to get Cleopatra right the next turn. Then it's Merrick Peace turn, and he also doesn't go for Confucius. So Confucius will end up being discarded. um, yeah, which is very interesting. I think he probably should have now taken Confucius, maybe with Colossus, maybe with Rich Land, instead of just taking the Engineering Genius, which is of course a solid pick, but yeah, I think all of the players here probably should have picked Confucius, but at the end he will actually end up being discarded. Now it's Vlaada's turn. Alex wasn't taken, and with that he has the chance to take him, and he will now have 2 additional yellows when he gets the value out of Alex and finishes the Roman roads. He will then just build a mine and increase his population, so doing relatively normal stuff. And for my turn, I had to make a decision about my leader, and I made a decision here to go for Cleopatra. Nowadays, maybe I would be willing to pay the additional civil action to go for Hammurabi, just because he can be such a strong leader, but I do think going for Cleopatra for civil action cheap is a fine decision, especially because I have the urban growth, meaning I can now build a lab for 1 resource cheaper and then have enough resources to build a mine and the first step of the Colosseum at the next turn, so I can get her bonus for the next few turns without having to delay my economy, and with that I think it's a fine pick, even though maybe I would go for Hammurabi nowadays. So I build my lab, I increase my population, so I do relatively efficient stuff, I would say. Then I draw a colonization card in the raid. Marek goes for Hippocrates, also isn't willing to pay an additional civil action for Hammurabi, elects him, takes the Stonehenge and builds a mine. Lets the iron stay on 2 civil actions for Vlaada, so let's see if he's willing to pick that card for 2 civil actions. Vlaada seeds, opens the development of religion. He doesn't use the ability of Alex yet, instead gets the free religion now, can build 2 stages of the Roman roads, and then takes the iron. Doesn't go into consumption yet. He could have also built the second lab already, but then he maybe would delay his Roman roads, and also he would go into consumption already, and like this he spends his action efficiently on the Roman roads, and then is willing to pay the price of 2 civil actions to get this early copy of iron going. Now it is my turn. I can't really use my politics phase. I will also take the free religion, then I will increase my population, I will build a mine, I will build a step of the Colosseum, and I will take the cultural heritage, and I think this turn looks completely solid to me. Of course, maybe the turn could be played with grabbing alchemy or something to have further opportunities to invest the resources of Cleopatra in, but I do think that would be too expensive here. I do think it's strong to build a mine and to use Cleo's resources, and there might be other opportunities to invest into some nice cards. Also, there are a bunch of leaders are coming down the road, so maybe at the next turn I could also replace Cleopatra potentially, and then getting some additional science with the cultural heritage I think is overall just a very solid turn here. Then I draw 2 cards, the Inhabited Territory and the Plunder. Marek P seeds and opens the development of civil life. He will use it, I think, to increase his population, builds a step of the Stonehenge, builds another step of the Stonehenge, increases his population, and builds another step of the Stonehenge, is delaying his second lab, is also not taking the breakthrough, or maybe one of those leaders, but he has the Stonehenge, so maybe doesn't need the science of the breakthrough in the second lab that urgently. Still, maybe there could have been maybe some alternative lanes being played, for example, building a lab, building a step, taking the breakthrough, or something like this. Vlaada this turn will use Alex, finishes the Roman roads, has now 2 additional yellow tokens, and then he will make the interesting choice of going for Michelangelo. And Michelangelo is a leader that I, over the last year, started to value definitely a bit more. I do think he definitely has a lot of potential. He has an extremely high ceiling of what you can get out of him. And I do think Vlaada has an interesting position here for Michelangelo. He has now already the additional resource production of the Roman roads, and he also can go for iron soon. Then he will have a lot of production. All of the H1 wonders are still there. There are some interesting ones for Michelangelo, especially with maybe Machu Picchu, St. Peter's Basilica. Also, Universitas and Great Wall can be strong to get. So I do think it's a very interesting line. Of course, he passes on some interesting cards like Breakthrough, maybe Alchemy. But yeah, Michelangelo has a lot of potential, and let's see where that Michelangelo pick will take Vlaada. Now it is my turn. I see the inhabited territory, which is a bit of a risk, because I have this one colonization card, but apart from that, I don't know how nicely I will be prepared to win that colony. There is a Suez Canal in the game. Nowadays, maybe I would be a bit more cautious, especially because I won't take the cartography, and I don't know if maybe Marek P with the Science of the Stonehenge will go for it. What I do have is the third military action that I will be getting soon, or already this turn, so I will get more draws. There's definitely a chance that I will be able to win the inhabited territory, and with that maybe it's fine to push it, but maybe I would be a bit more cautious nowadays, especially with the Suez Canal being the game and that colony potentially providing a lot of value for one of the other players. But of course it can also provide a lot of value for me if I maybe manage to win it. I finished the Colosseum here. Alternatively, I could have also gone for an alchemy upgrade, but now, especially with having seeded a colony, maybe getting the additional draws earlier could be quite beneficial, so I think that's fine. And then I will actually make the decision here to go for Saladin and then take the alchemy. And I do think it's a solid decision because Saladin, the additional civil action, probably provides me more value than the one resource of Cleopatra. And now I also take Saladin away from Marek P, who wants to have a replacement for Hippocrates. And now with the alchemy and printing press being discarded, Gutenberg is maybe not really the ideal leader to pick for him. So it's a little bit of a denial, but also an improvement for myself. And even though I could have maybe used Cleopatra even more over the next turns, if I go for the alchemy, the civil action is probably more valuable. And no, maybe I could have also gone for one alchemy upgrade and then going for Saladin, but I do think it's also fine to finish the Colosseum here, especially with me just having pushed this colony. So overall, apart from maybe just ignoring Confucius, but as you saw, I was not the only one doing that, I think I'm relatively happy about how I played back then. I think I played some relatively efficient turns, and now I'm at 5 civil, 3 military actions. I can start going for alchemy. I have actually drawn another colonization card, and with that, I think I have I played my early games solidly so far. Marek P seeds and opens the development of planning. He will finish the Stonehenge this turn for the development of planning. The options are agriculture, warfare, and markets. Marek P chooses the development of markets. He will finish the Stonehenge this turn and then takes the monarchy, wants to invest the science of the Stonehenge, also gets a third military action like that, and now is willing to build a second lab. Maybe could have built it a little bit earlier and then potentially would have had a little bit more science, but at the end it maybe still worked out fine for him to just use his actions efficiently on the Stonehenge. Vlaada's seeds in the development of crafts are revealed, giving potentially even more resources to him. He will, I think, take the free warrior from the development of warfare as an option from the development of planning, and then this turn he could have potentially maybe just gone for 2 iron upgrades, but instead he makes the decision to pick the Great Wall here. He has a second warrior already, maybe potentially also a tactic in hand. The Great Wall can potentially be a very strong wonder, can be also quite strong in the late game, and so he makes the decision to use the ability of Michelangelo this turn to grab the Great Wall for cheaper, delays his iron production for now, but at the next turn he can potentially start going for 3 iron upgrades, which would still be quite strong, or if he needs the strength he can maybe also just finish the Great Wall, so he has some interesting options for the next turn. Now it's my turn. I offer the open borders agreement to Marek P, which I think makes sense. We both have 3 military actions already. And then this turn I will start upgrading my economy a little bit. I think I took the 2 resources from the development of planning, from the development of markets. That allows me to even go for 2 upgrades to alchemy this turn, and then I grab a copy of Swordsman and Richland. Again, I think it's an efficient turn. I get my science production started. Maybe I could have been even a little bit greedy and could have taken both copies of Richland, but I think having a copy of Swordsman, especially with it also being that cheap with the Colosseum, is quite fine. So I think this turn is fine. I could have also developed a Swordsman, gone for one upgrade, making myself a little bit stronger, but then I wouldn't have gotten any copy of Richland, and I think having a copy of Richland in hand when you are going Alchemy first can be quite strong. And at the end of my turn, there's maybe an interesting decision to be made, because do I want to have the civil action from Saladin or the 2 strength? The 2 strength could make the difference between being weakest or strongest. I have only pushed the inhabited territory. There are 4 unknown events for me, and I do think if the strength of Saladin makes the difference between weakest and strongest, it can be worth it to take it, even though it can of course happen that it doesn't change anything if there are no strength events coming. So if you don't have knowledge about any strength events, and if the opponents maybe also didn't put a lot of effort into getting stronger, I do think it's fine maybe with doing the decision as I did, taking the civil action, but maybe taking the strength could have been also a very safe call here. And we can also see that I do get punished for my bit greedy decision of not taking the strength of Saladin. The foray is revealed, and of course not being part of that is definitely a little bit hurtful, and will now give my opponents a boost that I am missing out on. Merrick P takes the irrigation, takes the swordsman, develops the swordsman, builds a swordsman, builds another swordsman, goes up to 5 strength, and then takes the reserves. Isn't going for Isabella as a replacement for Hippocrates. Maybe is aiming towards Genghis Khan with going for those swordsmen potentially. Vlaada cedes, and now my inhabited territory is revealed, and sadly, even though I have 2 colonization cards, I'm not able to win it. Vlaada wins it with having the Typebreaker working in his favor, and with that, the first 2 events of the event deck haven't worked out greatly for me in this game. And if Vlaada is able to win it, he just finishes the Great Wall, but with Merrick P going up to 5 strength, and with him actually losing a warrior to the colony, I think he needs a bit of strength in finishing the Great Wall and rebuilding that warrior. He is fine, despite just having used a bunch of colonization card, because now he's only 1 strength behind. But now his iron production got a little bit delayed, and maybe that can slow his economical development a little bit down, but he is now at 4 strength, has the Great Wall, is now at 4 culture production, will maybe start creating a little bit of a culture lead, and yeah, with that definitely has a lot of potential. Now it's my turn. I actually seed an event, the scientific breakthrough. I'm of course the weakest, but I do think that also won't really change with how I play this turn, and the scientific breakthrough with me having 4 science production, I think can potentially work out quite nicely for me, especially because I still need a government farm. I will be able to invest into Code of Laws this turn, and then being able to go for Code of Laws and a government farm is quite costly, so I think despite already having a good science production here, getting the additional science will actually do still quite a lot of work for me as well. So I think it's fine that I maybe push here, even though I then again get punished by a strength event, which costs me some culture that will be transferred to Merrick P. I will then take and develop the Code of Laws with the amount of science that I have. I think that makes sense. I also go for the Swordsman. With having this medieval army tactic and no other tactic being revealed yet, maybe I could have waited for the 2nd copy of Knights, but I also have to be a bit careful, because Merrick P and I have the open borders agreement. Maybe he goes for an aggression. I would actually be able to defend this, but maybe it's also nice to keep the colonization cards. And so here, maybe also because I don't have that much else to do, I made the decision to go for the Swordsman, build 1, get a little bit of strength, take the reserves, and then play the cultural heritage, just playing my actions relatively efficiently. I then keep my cards, the tactic, and the developed territory. I draw some more events. Merrick P seeds and opens the knowledge of the ancients, so some additional science for everyone. He will go for the Genghis Khan, elects him, has the heavy cavalry tactic, goes up to 9 strength, is now looking quite a bit threatening, increases his population, and then goes for 2 upgrades to the irrigation, which allows him to increase his population again at the next turn. Vlaada this turn builds a warrior, goes for the iron and then goes for the Machu Picchu, leaves the irrigation, the second copy, on 2 civil actions for me, so it's a bit costly for me if I want to deny it. And yeah, but even if he doesn't get it with the additional production that he gets, maybe he can take even more wonders with Michelangelo, so that Machu Picchu definitely has some potential here. Maybe also the Universitas could have been a fine pick, but at least soon the Roman roads will switch to science production, and then maybe the Machu Picchu can be the higher priority, especially with Michelangelo really liking it when you get some additional resources to build even further wonders in H2. Now it is my turn, and with Merrick P. having gone for that strength push with still no infantry tactic being revealed, I made the decision here to actually take the knights for 3, and of course that is very expensive, but I do think it might be the right call to not be too vulnerable at some point. So I take the knights here, I develop them, I play the reserves for food, I increase my population, I build a knight, and then I reveal the tactic, which makes me stronger than Vlaada and maybe a little bit protected from potential strength events. Sadly, I don't have enough food to get another population out soon, which would allow me to go for a second army and would then again really help give me a bit of a boost for my strength. That's then my whole turn, but when we take a look at the cards that are available for civil action, maybe those are also not the most interesting. I leave the irrigation now for Vlaada, but I do think I agree with myself from 5 years ago that maybe that was too important to get those knights to not be completely behind in strength. I draw 2 cards, a raid and a pestilence. Merrick P seeds and opens the Good Harvest. And that worked out nicely for him because he just went for some additional food production. He takes the Bread and Circuses, plays the reserves for resources, builds another swordsman, is now at 11 strength, increases his population, takes the printing press, which might be interesting because he has the additional yellow tokens from Hippocrates and has some early food production, might have a lot of population. The printing presses are very cheap, and there is a Shakespeare in the game, and also Darwin, so I think the printing press is a very interesting pick here. Vlaada this turn will take the irrigation, which I think makes sense. Also goes for the Code of Laws to not be stuck on 4 civil actions. Now it might take him a little while until he has enough science to go for a government form, but after increasing his population 2 times, he will then build a warrior and go up to 8 strength, and with that can potentially defend if he has 1 H1 colonization card. But Merrick P knows that Vlaada has already sent 2 away, and he also saw that I bid 3. With having only 1 warrior, so he knows that has at least knowledge about 4 colonization cards, maybe even more if he has drawn some himself. Now it is my turn. I think I don't push here, and I actually go for the iron, which is maybe a little bit late, but I still think I again agree with myself from back then that it's probably the right call, because I have to use my 6 civil actions somehow, and I don't know when the first copy of coal will be there, and despite it sometimes being a nice option to maybe leave yourself, maybe take the iron, but leave yourself open for 1 or 2 turns potentially to maybe go into coal, I do think here I just have to use my actions to do something with them, and I can actually go for 2 iron upgrades and then take the drama, which I think is a fine pick because Bach is coming down the road, and there's also Marlene in H3, so I do think it's maybe nice picking that, especially because I can't really do a lot else with my last civil action. I was going for 2 iron upgrades, didn't have enough resource to upgrade this warrior. Let's also see again if I take the civil action or the strength from Saladin. And again, I'm a little bit greedy. Already back then maybe, but this time it would have only meant that I would not be the weakest, and some strength events are already out now. I again have no knowledge about strength events, so I do think it's maybe fine to take the civil action here. But of course I could get punished again. I draw some events in a blunder. Marek P seeds and opens the Dark Ages. I do think that's actually a fine event for myself, because the others don't have as strong of a science production as I have, and I also only lost 2 science, so maybe that doesn't hurt me as much, but of course I also will need quite a bunch of science to get into a government form. Marek P this turn goes for the St. Peter's Basilica, which will be somewhat expensive, but with the engineering genius maybe he can manage to build it relatively quickly. He builds a step of it and then also builds a warrior, and relatively soon, maybe with the happy face from the St. Peter's Basilica, could even go for a second heavy cavalry tactic with Genghis Khan, which could make him quite threatening. Then Vlaada Seeds, and I again get punished for not taking the Strength of Saladin. The uncertain borders are revealed, and I lose a yellow token, which definitely hurts, of course. Vlaada this turn is willing to pick the strategy for 3 civil actions, which I think is maybe an important safety pick. He has only those warriors at the moment. It looks like he maybe doesn't have any infantry tactic, and Merrick P, as said, can soon maybe go for a second tactic, so I do think the strategy an important safety pick here. And then with the remaining civil actions, Vlaada goes for 1 upgrade and takes the Organized Religion to have a happy face solution. Maybe the Organized Religion not the highest priority, maybe going for second upgrade could be fine. The problem with that, of course, would be that he then doesn't have enough resource to finish the Machu Picchu this next turn. And with that in mind, I do think the Organized Religion pick makes a lot of sense, because the team spots is also already in a row, and at some point he might need more happy faces, and now he has the opportunity to take a happy face solution for 1 civil action. So I do think that at the end is a good pick here. Now it's my turn. I again don't seed anything into the deck. And as you can see, I'm willing to pay 3 civil actions for the selective breeding, and it's, I think, a tricky question if that is actually the right call or not, because when we take a look at my opponents, Merrick P has already irrigation, and Vlaada has the Machu Picchu and has also irrigation in hand, so there's not really the necessity to maybe secure that copy for myself for expensive. But when we then take a look at what I can do at my turn, there's also the question, what could I actually do instead with my civil actions? Because what I am doing now, and I do think there's at least one thing that I definitely could have done instead of taking the selective breeding, but I will go for Bach, the frugality, the efficient upgrade, and then I will get out of corruption with upgrading this warrior to swordsman. So I could have now gone for 1 upgrade, and probably I should have also gone for this upgrade already instead of grabbing 2 yellow cards. Maybe I could have let the frugality stay on the row and instead go for this upgrade. I do think that feels not right to me to take the frugality, even though when I soon go for selective breeding, it can still give me more population earlier, and I have the drama and Bach now, so having a lot of population could be nice, but nonetheless, I think the upgrade probably would have been more important. But yeah, I could do the upgrade, but apart from that, I could maybe grab the team spots as a happy face solution, but there's also no Pierre in the game. I could maybe just grab Wave of Nationalism instead of the selective breeding, but when we take a look at the other options, I think those are not really that great. Maybe the navigation with the Suez Canal being the game, but I for the moment have no colony and have also no knowledge of, I have developed in hand, but I have not really a lot of knowledge about colonies, so I do think they're not the greatest alternatives here to take it instead of taking the selective breeding. So even though there's maybe not really the necessity to take it for that expensive, it could maybe still be fine, but maybe even just, no, probably just going for an upgrade and maybe grabbing something like Team Sports Navigation could still maybe be preferable, because I do think there's a good chance that it might be available for cheap for me at the next turn. But I made the decision to grab it for expensive, and I mean with the efficient upgrade I might now be able to go for it very quickly. I draw the International Trade Agreement, which I could potentially use to replace my Open Borders Agreement with. And now there's a bit of a setback for Vlaada, because Merrick P makes the decision with his 4 military actions that he's having to try a spy against Vlaada. Vlaada is 4 strength behind Merrick P, and he would need an H2 colonization card to defend himself. He didn't have that many draws already, and now he gets a bit punished, or was maybe a bit unlucky for not having any infantry. Tactic could have maybe built a warrior, but that would have come at a cost of not finishing the Machu Picchu at the next turn, so we can see here Vlaada also maybe plays it a little bit greedily here, and he does get punished by the spy, which is definitely a big setback, and the additional science is quite helpful for Merrick P. Merrick P then takes the opera, and we can see that Shakespeare is coming down the row, so with this many population and also with the additional happy face from the St. Peter's Basilica, maybe he could actually be in a position to go for a nice Shakespeare build here. He will then finish the St. Peter's Basilica, is now producing 3 plus the 3 of Genghis Khan, so 6 culture, and he's even building a printing press for another culture production and also to get a bit of science production going. Vlaada Seeds, I again didn't take the strength from Saladin, but this time I'm not punished. Instead the scientific breakthrough is revealed, which at the end gives me the most science. Vlaada will this turn finish the Machu Picchu, interestingly takes the Louvre, and then the navigation could again potentially build a warrior, knowing that Merrick P knows that he at the moment doesn't have any defense cards, but he maybe doesn't want to commit too heavily on warriors, and also maybe wants to have the resource available elsewhere, and with that is willing to take the risk of potentially getting hit by another aggression. Louvre is of course interesting, but he can grab it for very cheap with Michelangelo. Maybe it could be worth it to let himself open for potentially stronger wonder, but yeah, I mean the Louvre for some additional culture production with having that strong resource production can still be a fine wonder. But Vlaada doesn't take the Rifleman, which seems a bit greedy. Instead he takes the navigation. Maybe he has already a tactic drawn where it doesn't need a Rifleman. That of course could be the explanation, but normally, with being that heavily on warriors, the Riflemen are an important technology to get. Now it is my turn, and as you can see I don't offer the international trade agreement. Instead I see the barbarians, with having the hope that maybe it could hit one of my opponents. I mean, I could have maybe also just offered a pact to get the additional resource as early as possible, but I mean, there is the potential that the barbarians will do some damage. I'm not the weakest at the moment, so I guess it's a fine decision, but also getting the pact going as quickly as possible could maybe be the right call. The call to arms are revealed, so I do maybe get a little bit rewarded for seeding here and now actually only being the second weakest instead of the weakest. And this turn I could have gone into the constitutional monarchy, but that would have come together with corruption and maybe again with the issue of not being able to do that much. Also with the Colosseum, maybe the Republic could be an interesting alternative. Vlaada is very low in civil actions and science. Maybe the constitutional monarchy could even be available for me at the next turn. So I do think it's fine. There are still a lot of governments to get my food production getting started first, especially with me having Bach and drama and maybe really needing a lot of population at some point. So I go for 2 upgrades using the efficient upgrade, and again, like the turn before, I make the decision here to actually take 2 yellow cards and delay my mine upgrade again. And I do think I probably should have already upgraded this mine the turn before, maybe instead of grabbing the frugality. This time I think it could maybe be worth it to delay it, because I think the breakthrough will be extremely helpful for me to still have enough science left after going for a government form, and a wave of nationalism could potentially still give me 6 resources. Maybe I could have skipped the wave of nationalism here, because with having cheap units, maybe it won't be that easily possible to use the wave of nationalism for the 6 resources, but if I find a way to use it, of course it could still be very much worth it having taken it here, but delaying this mine definitely doesn't feel too great, so I probably already the turn before should have just upgraded it instead of grabbing the frugality. I now missed out already on 2 resources, and that maybe could start to be a little bit of a misplay here. I keep the pact, the Cold War, 2 colonization cards. I draw another colonization card, a war, and the iconoclasm. And Vlaada again does get punished here. He gets hit by a blunder from Merrick P. So definitely a bit unfortunate not getting the defense card. Merrick P actually having drawn another H2 aggression. So that is definitely a big setback. And now, of course, it will be interesting to see how nicely Vlaada will be able to recover from it. If it maybe will lead him into being at a very challenging a very difficult position, or if he can maybe still find a nice way back into the game. Merrick P has now 4 additional resources to work with, and with him only being on bronze mines, that I think is definitely quite strong for him. He will pick Shakespeare here. I think Shakespeare could work out quite nicely for him. And then he takes the cavalryman, the urban growth, and is actually willing to build another warrior. Is now heavily committed to infantry units, but for now is now at 17 strength, and if he gets more aggressions or wars, he could get really some nice benefits out of this. Has also the culture lead at the moment, so apart from his missing resource production and maybe also not the greatest science production, he definitely has some interesting things going for him with having the strength and culture lead at the moment, and also the potential of maybe getting a strong Shakespeare going. Sadly, with Merrick P taking a bunch of cards, the constitutional monarchy will land on the discard spot, meaning I might not have the opportunity to go for it at my next turn. The vast territory is revealed, and I of course don't remember now how much I was actually willing to bid 5 years ago, but I win it for 5, so I was at least willing to send 1 warrior, 1 swordsman, and 2 cards. Probably I was even willing to send all of the cards, but I have of course to be careful, because Merrick P, with being at 17 strength, could punish me if he has another aggression. But a good thing is, now the wave of nationalism might actually come in quite handy, because with getting more population, with sending unit away, now I might very nicely be able to use his the 6 resources of it, and rebuild my units sufficiently, hopefully not being in danger of an aggression. And in general, winning this colony I think is definitely nice for me. Vlaada has now only 5 resources after getting hit by a blunder. He goes for the navigation, takes the cannons, and again, he is in a vulnerable spot because he probably didn't have any H2 colonization card, and now he would need to draw 2 of them in order to be safe from an aggression. So if Marik P has indeed another aggression available, things could get quite dangerous for Vlaada. But he takes the cannons here, has the strategy, so maybe he can find a way soon to get a little bit safer from the military side. I offer the international trade agreement to Marik P that will replace the open borders agreement that we are having, and I will get some additional resource production. And in this turn I can play the wave of nationalism. I will increase my population 3 times, not using the frugality because of corruption reasons probably, and then I can build 2 units and even a third one, going for another knight, maybe in case I draw the conquistadors tactic, or maybe also the mobile artillery. I do think it makes sense to go for this third knight, even though there are of course some tactics like defensive army or something, or later on the more modern army in H3, where it could be beneficial to have a third swordsman, but especially with mobile artillery and potentially conquistadors, I think it makes more sense to commit to the knight. With that I'm at 14 strength, and even without needing to take the strength from Saladin, I am not in danger of an aggression any longer, which is nice. And then I have 2 civil actions left, which I will use to first of all finally go for the upgrade and take a copy of cannon. Revolutionary idea could have been interesting, but I think it was the right decision to not further delay the cannon, and add the iron upgrade and also getting the cannon is just, I think, an important safety pick, and also potentially take some tactic options away from Marik P. For now I haven't taken any I'm of course talking nonsense. I have already taken Bach, so I don't have to be concerned about getting any of those leaders. Then I keep the 2 events in the colonization cards. Marik P seeds, the barbarians are revealed. He has actually the most culture, but sadly he is the strongest at the moment. Soon when he will lose Genghis Khan, there might have been an opportunity or a window where he could have gotten hit by that, but sadly it is out now, and we can see he is actually going for Shakespeare this turn, goes for the justice system. I do think it's important for him to not be stuck on 5 civil actions during H2. He has a bunch of science lying around, so investing that into those blue techs I think could make sense, even though he is now a bit low on science and he can't that easily get into some military techs. We can also see that he kept the legion tactic in hand for quite long, so was very patient with that and gets rewarded now, because being at 13 instead of 9 strength definitely makes quite a difference. Then Vlaada Seeds, the historic territory is revealed. I was actually willing to bid for that, but not more than 1 unit, and with Vlaada having gone for the navigation, he's able to win it. He maybe went for the navigation a little bit too late, because the vast territory of course would have been a very strong colony that he could have won potentially. But I mean, that was maybe not a nice chance to go for later, but the vast territory at the end was maybe a bit revealed a bit too early for him. He will develop the cannons this turn, and now we can maybe, not yet, but soon we can maybe see why he was willing to pass on the rifleman earlier on. He will build 2 cannons. That is of course somewhat signaling a potential tactic that he could have, and already without a tactic he is at 16 strength, is making a nice use out of the Great Wall, but he's very low in science now. The spy definitely is still costly, also of course the blunder. And then he will take the reserves, increases population, and takes the efficient upgrade. Is not taking a copy of Republic yet. Maybe could have done a revolution at the next turn, but he also probably still wants to go for the irrigation before the end of the age with the Machu Picchu, so a revolution maybe not really that easily doable here. I seed actually the Cold War into the deck, which I do think is a bit of a risky seed. First of all, because Vlaada really can use some science at this point. Also Marik P is low in science, while I have a decent amount of science saved up and have the breakthrough, so the science is probably the least valuable for me, and also it's not clear if I will even be able to win it. Of course I'm not the weakest, maybe I want to push, but Yeah, I think I probably shouldn't have pushed a Cold War here, because that has just the potential to help my opponents quite a bit. Then I opened a wealthy territory. Vlaada is able to win it, can get rid of another warrior, and has now 6 additional resources, which I think will be very helpful for him, because now, for example, he could just finish the Louvre at the next turn, and with not having enough science to develop an end-to-end tech, apart from the irrigation, of course, that could be quite strong for him, being able to finish that wonder. I this turn can finally go for a government form. Playing without one was not the biggest issue, with having Saladin, Colosseum and Code of Laws, but now I will still get a big boost. I can take the Republic, I elect Bach. Potentially there would even be the opportunity here to do a little trick, because what of course I could do, I could take the Republic in hand, elect Bach now, and out of the sudden the civil action from Saladin is gone, meaning I have all my civil actions unused, and I could do revolution, so that's an interesting trick to have in mind. Basically the little brother of the Eleanor revolution trick is the Saladin revolution trick. And but in this situation I don't think it makes sense to go for that line, because with having Bach I of course want to get the dramas that I still have in hand developed. Of course I could hope towards getting an opera, but I have a lot of population now after having won the vast territory, so I do think it's probably fine to go for those very cheap dramas. I then go for the Republic, and actually I just first of all upgrade a religion, and then I just build a bunch of them. And I do think probably it's a fine call. They are not the most interesting things on the card draw. I mean, I could have taken something like the Frugality, for example, but just getting a lot of culture production started, especially with me being a bit behind in culture, I do think makes sense. And now I'm playing with 8 civil actions. I'm at the moment at least not the weakest. I don't have any tactics, so that could get a bit problematic, but I think I have a fine position. My economy is, I guess, fine. The science is not that strong, but I have 8 actions. I have to overcome a culture gap, but at least I have Bach for now. Merrick P, of course, can easily increase his culture production even more with having Shakespeare, but yeah, so I would say overall my position is fine. We can maybe also soon, when H3 starts, take a look at the overview for a closer evaluation. I then take the urban growth. The Frugality for some additional food maybe could also be fine, especially because I have already reached my urban building limit now, so maybe I will need it for a Happy Face solution at some point, maybe for upgrade to computers, but the Frugality would just maybe give me a little bit more of a safe value, while the urban growth could also be stuck in my hand for a while. I draw some events. Merrick P doesn't see it. Instead, he actually builds the 3rd farm. He could have immediately started building some urban buildings, but he is a bit patient and makes the decision here that maybe having more food production will, on the long run, still be an advantage for him. Maybe will help him later on to be getting even more culture with Shakespeare potentially. He then takes the patriotism, and the Frugality is still in bronze mine, so having some additional resource available for the military could turn out to be quite important for him. Now, for example, he could build 2 instead of only 1 H2 unit. Vlaada has the fortifications tactic that will now finally make it that he is not only stabilized in strength, but is now maybe even the most threatening one. The only bad thing is, of course, for him that he is still on 2 military actions, but yeah, at the moment definitely has by far the most strength. And then with his remaining civil actions, he will go for 1 irrigation upgrade with an efficient upgrade, finishes the Louvre, has now 9 culture production, has now additional food production, quite a nice yellow bank thanks to some colonies that he was able to win. And despite, I mean, he has still some potential. Culture-wise, he still has quite a lead before me. He's now the leader in strength, but of course he has this very low science production and is still in despotism. But if he manages to fix that somewhat quickly, then maybe he can still transition into a strong H3. Now it is my turn. I see the arms industry, which at the moment would give me 4 resources, and I will actually take some military technologies also this turn, so I think it's a fine seat with me being not the weakest. The developed territory is revealed. I was not willing to send more than 1 unit, which I guess is fine. At the end, Merrick P is able to win it for just a swordsman, which sadly I think is quite a nice improvement for him. And then I will increase my population, and I make the interesting decision here to build a 3rd farm. But when we take a look at this turn, I mean, it's the question what to do. I can't build another drama, and I think I have some fine options, or a variety of options that could all be fine on how I want to spend my resources and where do I want to put my population. I could of course build an additional iron mine, however, with me having those cheap buildings, I do think I like the farm more than an additional mine. What maybe could be interesting would be an additional lab. I do think some additional science production could also still be valuable. On the other hand, I have a bunch of science saved up. There is also a red cross in the game, so for that a farm could be interesting. I could just build a religion, getting another happy face, a bit of culture production. I could build another swordsman, getting a bit more strength. So I think a variety of options, but I do think the additional farm could still pay off with the red cross being the game, and with it still maybe at some point giving me more population during age 3. So an interesting investment, but I think it's nice that I spotted such an interesting opportunity to maybe build a third farm. So I'm uh, yeah, my congratulations to my former self of at least spotting this opportunity of a more unusual move. And yeah, I mean, it's the question, what else could there be to spend the civil actions nicely, to invest my resources, maybe even taking the Harvard College for expensive and start working on it instead of the selective breeding could be an interesting idea, further boosting my science production, setting up for an even stronger economy, but it's relatively late. I think at this point I also didn't value the Harvard College as highly as I do it now, and it would also be a bit expensive and a bit late, so maybe just hoping to instead get something like computers could be an idea. So I do think maybe finish just building this farm is fine, and then I have to spend quite a bunch of actions to just take some cards. I take those 2 yellows, the organized religion, the rifleman, the cavalryman. I have to be a bit careful about hand space here, especially because the rich land, we will have to see if I find a nice opportunity to use it. If there's an early oil, that could be quite strong, but if not, then I might not just I might not find any nice way to use it. The organized religion, I mean, having a happy face solution is probably still important, and those two are just some cheap technologies with the Colosseum and open up the opportunity or the possibility to go for an H3 tactic. So I do think most of the cards are fine, just the rich land is a bit questionable. Maybe I could have even just floated the civil action instead of grabbing that. At the end I made a decision to grab it, but I might have some hand space issues soon, and with that maybe just letting the rich land be in the row could be fine. Maybe also depending on whether it was in a discard spot or not. I sadly don't see it now. If you are interested, you can maybe go a little bit back in the video to see if it was in the discard spot. If it was not in the discard spot, there's of course the denial factor, because Merrick P could potentially still want to go into coal, and then the rich land could accelerate how quickly he can go for those upgrades, and then maybe as a small denial pick, it could of course then still turn out to be a better pick than just wasting the civil action. Instead of grabbing those military techs, I could have also just taken the reserves, but I think with the Colosseum and with me not having a tactic yet, being prepared for H3 tactics is important. But I do actually draw a tactic, the defensive army, not the ideal one, but maybe I can make it work somehow. H3 starts. Merrick P will use the frugality, gets 2 new population, and this turn wants to get a bit stronger. Vlaada is looking a bit threatening, even though he has of course only 1 H2 card in hand, but Merrick P nonetheless goes for 2 cavalrymen, reveals the classic army tactic, is now sitting at 21 strength. At least I also soon will be able to use the classic army tactic, and then he still takes the coal in hand. It's now already H3, so starting to go for it at the next turn is quite late, but maybe, especially with not the most interesting alternatives to use the civil actions, it could still be fine to have it in hand. Now we are at the beginning of H3, so let's maybe take a quick look at the overview. With having had Bach now, I already catched up a little bit of culture. I'm now at 40 culture. My big advantage is that I have 8 actions at the moment, and I have a solid economy. I have now a very strong food production thanks to the international trade agreement pact. Also definitely some strong resource production. Science production is fine, especially I have already a lot of science saved up. What could be a bit problematic for me is my military, because I have only those H1 units. I can copy the classic army tactic soon, but especially if I don't get air forces, that might just not be enough to have a lot of strength, and also the next population will be unhappy, so getting 3 more units maybe for a second classic army tactic is not that easily achievable. I have seeded a Cold War, which might help my opponents, and which at the moment I'm not looking nicely prepared for, so I do think that could at this point maybe be the biggest weakness of my former self. Vlaada definitely also has quite some issues. He has still this casually. The fortifications, I think, make him at least quite threatening militarily, but he is very low in science, still needs a government form, and it will be a challenge for him to fix those things. And then Merrick P. Has not the most science and production, it's only in bronze mines, but has a nice food income, has now found a tactic, is fine for the military for now. If he finds enough yellow cards, maybe he will be fine in the military even if he just stays in bronze mines. And of course here Shakespeare can very cheaply with the architecture build some more urban buildings and get even more culture production. So an interesting position at this point. Merrick P has almost a 30 culture lead before me, so I first of all have to overcome this, and he might get even more culture production with Shakespeare. Vlaada definitely has some issues, so let's see how nicely he will be able to fix those. So I think at this point every player still has chances. Vlaada will have some challenges. I need to be careful about my military, and Merrick P just maybe needs to be careful to not play too greedily, but also of course make sure to maybe somehow get the second pair running very quickly. Now it's Vlaada's turn. Let's see if he can do anything with the one card that he's having in hand. He isn't using his politics phase, so maybe that isn't an event or something. He will go for Maria Theresa, and he has some nice food income, so she might generate him some nice value, especially the additional science of her might be especially important in this situation. And he actually builds 2 cannons immediately, which is interesting because maybe it could have been an idea to just build 1 for now and then maybe use Maria's resources at the next turn to build the next one. Building 2 immediately is maybe a little bit of a sign that that could be an aggression potentially, because that definitely would be a reason to build that cannon already. And yeah, then at the next turn maybe he can potentially build even more cannons, and he is definitely now at a threatening amount of strength. The only good news is of course that he is not drawing any cards, so that makes him less threatening, but I still have to find a way to get stronger, otherwise I might at some point get punished. For now that's not that easily possible. I will develop the organized religion here, probably mainly to first of all make space in my hand. I will build one. I will take the fast food chains actually, which is actually quite a decent wonder for me here, with having a lot of population already, with having the 3rd farm. So I think it's a fine wonder to take. It's a bit greedy, I think, what I'm doing here, because I am will first of all, to get out of corruption, go for an upgrade to cavalryman. I'm safe from an aggression from Eric P, but if Vlaada has indeed an aggression, I might get hit by one. And I don't take reserves or military build-up, some cards that could be really helpful to maybe find the necessary resources or maybe also food to defend myself. So taking the fast food chains here that I can finish later on with the help of the engineering genius that I've taken. It could still be nice to have that wonder. The other ones are maybe a bit more tricky to fulfill. Yeah, I mean, the other ones are indeed a bit more tricky to fulfill. Maybe I have to take this risk here, that take that potentially strong wonder, and at least I have a lot of food. I also have decent resources. The resources are maybe not the thing I need the most, but still, I'm now vulnerable to potential aggression if Vlaada has kept one, and I didn't take any of those yellows. I leave them for Merrick P, meaning that he might now have it a bit easier to defend himself. So I'm taking a bit of a greedy line, but considering that I'm still behind and that the other wonders are difficult to build, I think it can be argued that maybe it has to be taken. Or not it has to be, but it's a valid line to take that risk here, I think. I draw another colonization card, which might help me to prevent further aggressions, but it's not enough to defend myself against Vlaada. But interestingly, that danger will not be there any longer, because the autonomous territory is revealed and Vlaada is willing to send quite a lot of units, but he doesn't need a warrior that badly anyway. Into the colony is now only at 19 strength, meaning I'm not in danger any longer of an aggression, but I think despite potentially, if that is even an aggression, even if it is an aggression, it could be worth it, because Vlaada will now take the additional science, has now 6 instead of only 5 actions, 3 instead of only 2 military actions, so I think this territory is just extremely strong for him, and it might be worth it to send all of those units away, even if it maybe comes to the cost of not being able to go for an aggression. Merrick B is actually disbanding some units in order to go for another pair, and then is grabbing the air forces. Which on one hand is of course an important pick for the military, but he is also not he is also willing to not take any of those 2 yellow cards, especially the military build-up, the potential 10 additional resources can really do a lot. So that feels a bit greedy to not take those cards. Maybe those are even more important than the air forces here. But yeah, having the air force is of course also extremely important, especially with a tactic like the classic army. Now it's Vlaada's turn. He will increase his population. He will increase his population, or could increase his population again afterwards. He goes for the strategy, makes sure to draw 3 cards. He knows that one thing that he has going for himself at the moment is that military pressure, and then additional draws and getting even more strength is just extremely viable. Investing into the strategy, of course, makes it a bit more tricky to go for computers quickly. He could have maybe even gone for a computer upgrade this turn already, but instead he maybe wants to put some pressure on his opponents. And thanks to Maria, if he is willing to play the reserves for food at the next turn, he could still go for computers at the next turn. But of course, not going for it this turn is costly. So let's see if we can maybe capitalize on it with going for a successful aggression, for example. Now it is my turn, and I will first of all copy the classic army tactic. Being low in military actions is a bit painful now. I don't get a lot of draws going, but I need to copy this tactic at some point, and also copying it already, or not already, I need to go for a little bit more strength, but then I can defend against Vlaada with my defense cards that I'm having. So I will increase my population, I build another swordsman, and then I built a step of the fast food chains. I'm not certain if maybe it was an idea to build a cavalryman, but if that is not enough to get out of corruption by itself, maybe it's fine to build a swordsman and then a step. But of course those resources could be missing when I at some point have to defend myself. But the good news is that the military buildup actually made its way back to me. So this time, after taking the movies and the fundamentalism, I will take the military buildup and the multimedia. And I think again, maybe I'm just taking a bit too many cards here. I think the multimedia is a bit optimistic. The movies may be fine to pick because there's Chaplin in the game, but for the multimedia, apart from Einstein, there's not a lot of synergy, and being able to spare the population for it is a bit unrealistic, I think. So maybe just again either not using the civil action or maybe just accepting corruption, using the engineering genius already. Could be some alternatives because now I have a relatively full hand. I like it that I take the fundamentalism here because I have a bunch of science and I could definitely I'm in a vulnerable position here, and the additional strength in military actions could be extremely helpful. So I like that, but I think the multimedia is maybe something that I should rather leave on the row because now I actually have a full hand, and I really might some hand space issues over the next turns. I keep actually a war, interestingly, and 2 colonization cards. Merrick P plays the reserves for resources and just builds 1 air force, is now at 33 strength, is fine for now. Sadly, that of course will also mean that Vlaada will gain some additional resource now from Maria Theresa. And we can see there are now no resource yellows for the military on the row for Merrick P, meaning he is now at a fine amount of strength, but he's only at 0 plus 3 resources, and then that could get very, very threatening for him soon. So now he maybe gets a bit punished for not taking the military build-up at the turn before, depending on whether Vlaada or I maybe actually try to pursue a more strength-based approach for the remaining turns. Vlaada will see it has drawn an impact that he wants to push. The popularization of science is revealed, which is a bit unfortunate for Vlaada because he will actually start going for computers this turn, and that event soon would have been a lot better for him. Vlaada this turn will play the reserves for food, will increase his population 2 times, and thanks to that has just enough science to go for the computers this turn, upgrades 1, builds a cannon, actually takes the resource, 1 token from the Louvre to build another cannon, makes sure to draw 3 cards, is now at 44 strength, and takes the democracy to maybe at some point find a way to get this government form going. But again, he is looking very threatening, and I have to see if I can avoid getting hit by an aggression. There's a copy of Military Theory coming down the row, which maybe could help me with that. And this turn is just mainly dedicated towards making sure to defend myself, I will first of all develop the Rifleman. That I just mainly do to make space in my hand. I'm not sure if I played a military build-up this turn. I think actually not, because I will use a lot of civil actions this turn, also to do some stuff that will help me defending myself. So instead I use, I develop the Rifleman to make space in my hand. I then take the military theory, develop it. I take the revolutionary idea, I will increase my population, I build a Rifleman, and I go for some upgrades to go up to 31 strength. And with that I actually have enough, thanks to the additional military actions, to defend against an aggression. I will still be drawing some cards, and so I think that is an important turn to make sure that I'm safe. And no, but despite my culture production with Bach, I am not really catching up that much. Vlaada is now seeded, gets also a little bit of additional culture from Maria Theresa, and Merrick P has found a opportunity or the window to get a second pair with Shakespeare going. So with that I am still not really catching up in culture that much, but at least I'm somewhat safe for the military now, and with the military build-up I still have a lot of resources lying around. The revolutionary idea I take for 3. Maybe I could have also taken the patriotism, maybe I could have just used the military build-up already, but I think it's fine to take the revolutionary idea here, because there is still a copy of Air Forces that I can hope towards getting it, and then the revolutionary idea would just make it a lot easier for me to take that Air Force, and generally might allow me to go for some additional technologies which could get rewarded by impacts and stuff. So I do think that was a fine turn, and just trying to be somewhat safe. I draw 2 cards. The Shock Troops tactic, which is actually interesting with me already having developed Rifleman and Cavalryman, but I have a bunch of Rifleman, actually 4 now. I'm not sure if I built an additional Rifleman. Maybe I could have built a Cavalryman, but of course then if I draw something like the Modern Army tactic, that could be quite bad, and the Modern Army has more copy of it. There are more copies of it in the deck than the Shock Troops tactic, so I do think it was a fine decision to go for Rifleman here. I draw 2 impacts, and especially the impact of Harmony is looking quite strong. As you can see, I have 6 urban buildings, 6 unit workers here, and 7 in the military, thanks to winning that vast territory and to now having the 3rd farm. The impact of Harmony is definitely a strong impact. The impact of Happiness definitely also a seedable one, and Vlaada at the moment doesn't have a lot of happy faces, so could even be a strong impact against him. Merrick P makes sure to get the 2nd copy of Military Theory. We can also see that the 2nd copy of Air Force is coming down the row. He will now take the Patriotism, and with that has just enough resource to go for 2 more Cavalrymen and at least another outdated Classic Army tactic, which might make him somewhat safe for now. Vlaada seeds another impact into the deck, and the international negotiations are revealed. There's also the Cold War from me still in the deck. That is not revealed yet, luckily for me. But the international negotiations will cost me 3 resources that Vlaada will take away from me now. He will use those resources to go for an additional upgrade to his labs, while still being able to go for another cannon, going up to 48 strength. Then he will take the Air Forces, the Engineering Genius, and the Urban Growth. And at the next turn he might have the opportunity to go for the Democracy, especially now when with the Cold War being revealed. I actually made a decision to push here, with knowing that a Cold War is of course in the deck, and also actually with getting stronger this turn, which of course feels wrong, but the thing is I have already 2 impacts in hand that are seedable, so I think I agree with my former self that maybe I need to seed here, especially because the science of course would be nice to have in the Cold War, and it helps my opponents. But I think, especially if I draw some additional impacts, I could really miss this politics phase if I don't use this. So I think I need to take that risk here, and there was at least a 33.3% chance that maybe the Cold War is not revealed yet. Of course, then maybe there could have been another strength event revealed. This turn I can play the military build-up. I will increase my population, I will build a cavalryman, and then I can use all of the resources with just going for some upgrades. I had a little bit of a weird mix of units with those knights, cavalrymen, swordsmen, riflemen, but now I have upgraded all of them to the H2 version, and with also having a 2nd Classic Army tactic going now, I'm now at 45 strength, and I'm looking somewhat safe at least, but I know that I won't be able to get Air Forces. Then again, I build another step of the fast food chains to get out of corruption, which I could get punished for, but I mean, Vlaada, if he has a war, I could declare it, go for an 8th cannon. I mean, it could get a bit dangerous, but I have enough science to go for the fundamentalism, so hopefully I won't get punished. What I actually will be doing is going for Churchill here, and with Churchill, despite having spent now those 4 resources in the fast food chains, I actually have 10 resources for the military at the next turn, and thanks to the shock troops tactic, I could build 2 cavalrymen and then go for 2 shock troops instead of 2 classic armies, and with that, maybe I'm at least somewhat safe combined with the fundamentalism. I play the Revolutionary Idea, take the urban growth, and actually skip my last civil action because I have a full hand. Now we can see that this rich land still hasn't been used yet, and maybe if I wouldn't have taken that, I could have taken something like satellites, but who knows. If that wasn't on the discard spot, then also things might have just gone different generally. I draw 2 more impacts, government and architecture, so I am, despite a Cold War being revealed, maybe it could still turn out to be the right decision with drawing those impacts. Merrick P goes for the Red Cross, builds 3 stages of it with the architecture, doesn't have more food, but I think the Red Cross is a very nice way for him to finish a wonder with him being on bronze mines, and his cultural lead is getting bigger and bigger, and if he isn't punished by the military, then yeah, I and Vlaada have to see how we want to overtake him. He's using also the patriotism, he's going for some units, can go for another classic army tactic potentially at the next turn, and is at 43 strength already, with that should be somewhat safe. Vlaada seeds another impact, the arms industry is revealed, it was seeded by myself, giving me 4 resources now, so I actually get the most resources out of it. Vlaada goes for Einstein this turn, increases population with Maria Theresa, could increase his population one more time, but there's also the step of a Red Cross that he still wants to build, so he now switches to Einstein, develops the democracy, increases culture production, scoring his first culture with Einstein, taking the Empire State Building, and then you building a step of the Red Cross, which also allows him to get out of corruption. Let's see if he's willing to build another cannon, or if he isn't doing. If he doesn't want to do it, he will use the 1 additional resource from Maria Theresa. Goes up to 57 strength, maybe potentially being able to go for an aggression at his next turn. And him being at 57 is actually annoying for me, because I have 1 H3 defense card, but that combined with 5 additional cards that I could still be having is only 11, so I'm just not able to defend against an aggression if Vlaada should try one, and if I shouldn't draw another card. I see it. I think that was the impact of happiness, if I'm not mistaken, and we can see here that Vlaada at the moment really doesn't have a great happiness, so that also could just turn out to be a very strong impact for me. The event revealed is the National Bride, Merrick P getting an even bigger culture lead. I this turn will first of all build a step of the Red Cross. I will then use the Engineering Genius too before I will lose it, and also to maybe get out of corruption potentially, and also because only 4 resources are needed now anyway, I will also complete the fast food chains already this turn. I'm not sure if maybe I could have instead not finished it, maybe even taken corruption, but maybe finding a way to potentially even build another thing at the next turn to make the fast food chains bigger. But on the other hand, with being vulnerable to an aggression, and I won't do anything in order to not be vulnerable to an aggression, I could get hit by something like a blunder, and then of course maybe it could be bad having spent a resource elsewhere and potentially then not being able to finish the fast food chains. So and that could be a reason to finish it. After that I will go for the engineering, I will go for the movies, and I will go for an upgrade. I could go for another upgrade with the urban growth, but I actually make the decision against it and take the modern infantry, which is an interesting call, but maybe has something to do with safety concerns, because Merrick P could potentially declare war and go for another classic army to put him at 53 strength. But I mean, with Churchill, even if I spend a bit more resources, I could still go for the 2 shock troops, which I think would give me +6 from the units and then another +6 from the tactic, so +12, so that should actually be enough. Maybe with Churchill I could of course develop the modern infantry, which also gives me 2 culture with the Colosseum, prepares me for something like impact of technology, maybe allows myself to go for some upgrades if I have some unused resource at the end. So I do think the modern infantry could help me, but maybe just using the urban growth to go for another upgrade and for 2 more culture immediately maybe could be fine, but probably I did some thoughts back then about this turn, as it was quite a close game, especially between me and Vlaada, and might decide on which one will be able to win the group at the end. So probably I thought about this. It just feels like getting the 2 safe culture going immediately, especially with not knowing whether the modern infantry will be used at the next turn, could maybe be the safer play, especially with having the shock troops defense tactic. I draw the impact of competition. Merrick P doesn't go for a war. Now I could have even threatened to go for another classic army tactic, so that should prevent him from going for one. The impact of happiness is revealed, and that could turn out to be a very important impact for me against Vlaada. Merrick P takes the patriotism, the reserves, destroys a mine, and destroys a lab, just goes for a 3rd pair, building it now with Shakespeare, and getting one last Shakespeare production is now 202 culture and has quite a big lead, so catching up to him will get more and more difficult. Now H4 starts, and Vlaada is indeed going for an armed intervention against me. I sadly haven't drawn another colonization card, and with that I'm just missing one tiny little strength to defend. Maybe I could have gone for some alternative play for going for some more strength, but probably it was worth the risk, because Vlaada could also just have another nice impact that he could see it and doesn't want to go for an aggression anyway, so doing something awkward like developing fundamentalism or destroying something to build another unit, especially with the impact of harmony also being in there, probably is not worth it. But I do get punished here, and the 14 culture swing, of course, could be quite significant. Vlaada this turn can finish the Empire State Building with the Engineering Genius for 24 points, so a solid Empire State Building. Increases population, takes the rockets, develops the rockets. Unluckily for him, there are just not enough technologies left in the row to go for a second technology with Einstein, and we will see that it will be also somewhat significant, not only missing out on 3 culture from Einstein, but at the beginning of my turn, when we see what impact will be revealed, it will actually be the impact of technology. That was now a little spoiler, but you will see it in a few seconds. One thing to note, Vlaada interestingly destroyed this farm instead of a mine, which is a big indicator that the impact of industry might be in the deck, because otherwise keeping the farm might be better, as it helps for both agriculture and balance, but Vlaada being willing to destroy the farm could indicate an impact of industry. I see the impact of architecture. Now we can see what I just spoiled a few seconds ago. The impact of technology is revealed, which is actually not the big one for Vlaada. He had Einstein, but of course at the beginning and middle of age 3 he for some time still had very low science production, so he didn't have enough technologies or enough science to get enough technologies, and also indeed not enough technologies at the end, with not a lot of technologies being in the row, and having the opportunity to maybe get 3 plus 4 more culture with just being 1 more tech on the row could have maybe helped him quite a bit here. Now it is my turn, and I will first of all go for Churchill. I will go for 2 upgrades, I will increase my population, I will build a religion, and I think that's all that I'm doing. That all seems relatively logical. I don't think there is anything great to consider. That was unhappy that work, so I kind of have to maybe build something that gives a happy face. I can't build an additional movie, and then just going for those upgrades for some additional culture production should be fine. Now that the impact of technology is out, I don't think it makes sense to use Churchill to go for this modern infantry, especially also with knowing that at least the impact of competition won't be in the deck. So I just took the culture of Churchill here. Then it's Merrick P's turn. He sees my impact of harmony is revealed, which again gives me some nice points against Vlaada, but we can see that I also need those points. I'm now only barely in the lead, and 2 of my strong impacts are now already out. So let's see if I'm well enough prepared for some other impacts to stay ahead of Vlaada. And Merrick P is now not that much in the lead, but of course he still gets one more production and then he will have quite a strong lead again. He gets Marlene Dietrich this turn, plays the Patriotism, builds an Air Force, which could be an indicator that he maybe has seeded the impact of strength in now, and that potentially could turn out to be a bad impact for me. And before the final impacts, it's very close between me and Vlaada, but Merrick P's lead probably is too big, so probably catching him is not really possible. The first impact is actually a good one for me, maybe also seeded by Merrick P very likely, the impact of culture giving me +7 against Vlaada. Then there's the impact of industry, that one was kind of to be expected after Vlaada destroyed the farm instead of the mine, and it gives him at least a little bit against me. The impact of wonders is then a very good impact for Vlaada, giving him +11 against me, which already allows him to overtake me, so now I really have to hope that the last unknown impact is not a good one, because there is still one impact that I've seeded, the impact of architecture, which is actually a solid one. So let's see what impacts are left. And there is indeed the impact of strength, giving Merrick P +14 points and Vlaada +7 against me. And while the impact of architecture is strong, it is not strong enough to overtake Vlaada here. I am at the end 4 points behind him and lose this game. And Vlaada finishes at the second position. Now, so that was quite an exciting finish between me and Vlaada, and I still remember this game and also the armed intervention that I just was one strength away, because that was a little bit of a memorable game situation for me, especially because I played against Vlaada and it was very close in the standings and everything. Of course, I put a lot of thoughts into those games, and we will also shortly take a look at the standings that that group had at the end. And yeah, so I think an interesting game. I think there were definitely a lot of turns that I think I played very solidly. I think I already played my actions relatively efficiently. I probably would have done a lot of decisions differently nowadays. Of course, starting with that Confucius pick at the beginning that I didn't go for. But also some other decisions. I think also some seeding decisions I would have done differently. Seeding inhabited territory, especially seeding Cold War. I think I did some decisions there that maybe were a bit too risky. But overall, I think already back then I played definitely solidly. Vlaada went for this strong Michelangelo play, and then at the beginning of H2 got hit by those aggressions, which I think were quite a big setback. He played it a bit greedily, but I don't blame him. You know me, I also am not always prepared to defend against some aggressions if I think it gives me some benefits, or even if it gives me no benefits, if we have how we have seen in, like we've seen in the last stage of the World Championship. So I definitely don't blame him for that, but I think it was still nice to see how he just got back into the game, because it looked quite challenging for him, with him being on despotism, with very low amounts of science. I think it was definitely looking very challenging for him, but he nicely managed to come back, got those computers running, put a little bit of pressure on both Merrick P and me with going for some strength, and at the end, with the armed intervention, managed to finish before me and showcase that he was able of doing a nice comeback here. And Merrick P at the end able to win this game, managed to get a very nice Shakespeare going, managed to defend himself, and at the end just played it very solidly and won that game. Alright, and with that game being, with us now being finished, with taking a look at this very old game, which has already finished a long time ago, we can now take a look at the standings from back then and see how the outcome of this game maybe also shaped the final standings at the end. And we can see here that the standings were actually extremely close at the end. Vlaada was able to win the group with being a half a point in the lead before me, and also Saru, interestingly, was part of that group back then, and Saru recently managed to get some very strong results going, participated in the Grandmaster Division of the International Championship, and just is in a great form at the moment. So Interesting also that he was part of that group, so very close between us. But also thanks to finishing before me in the 3-player game, Vlad at the end took the lead in that group and managed to win the group. But it was an extremely close finish, because when we see the last game that finished in that group, which of course I back then was following and eagerly awaiting, we can see that Vlada and Saru actually tied for the first place in that group. If Saru would have had one culture more, Vlada would have finished at the second place instead of a shared first place, and I would have more points, but Saru would have then 1.5 points more, would be at 28, the same as me, but I would win the tiebreaker against him, so it was quite a close group. But at the end it was not enough for me. The good news for me was then that because of being one of the best second places and because of some players leaving the Platinum Division, I still was able to play in the Platinum Division in the season after. So with that, it didn't have some very bad consequences for me, and I could still play in the Platinum Division in the next season. No, but that was of course a very great experience, playing against a game designer himself. And now Vlada definitely has shown in this group that he can play his game very well and manage to win this group. Alright, I hope that was an interesting experience for you, taking a look at such an old game and taking a look at some gameplay of the actual game designer. And now, before we will finish the video, we can maybe take a quick look at the other leagues at this point of which other players were playing in the international championship, and which names we can maybe find in the leagues that are still playing at a high level nowadays. And we can see that the winner of season 10, which that season actually was, it's the first season actually on the tournament page, was the first season organized with that nice tournament page, but already the 10th season in total. And Frotus was the player who won it back then with quite an impressive 30-point season. I think at this point Frotus managed actually to win quite a bunch of seasons. I think he won 3 seasons in total out of 4 seasons. So he had a very strong run back then. And then there were some other names. Some of them aren't really playing any longer. I think Invalid name I didn't see for a while. I think at some point he participated maybe still in the team championship, but I'm not completely certain. Dr. Renate is still playing. Of course, Payada, back then in the Grandmaster division already. Himmelstosh, you also know, who finished at the second place in the year when I won the World Championship. And then that was also the season where DJ Parson managed to rank up to Grandmaster for the first time. I remember that that was really great, or I was very hyped because the replay feature didn't exist back then, and yeah, DJ Parson covering his games and then moving up to the Grandmaster division was actually the only way to see some Grandmaster games, which I was very excited for. So DJ Parson moving up. Tamuras is still playing nowadays, but we can also definitely see some names who are maybe not that active nowadays. But I think if we go a bit further down, I spotted some interesting names in Platinum Home. There's Dyron Tropy, who then later on managed to win an Intermezzo championship and is still playing in the Transcontinental Ladder nowadays, who managed to win up to the Master Division here. And I think in Platinum we don't have that many recognizable names, but if we go to Gold, we can see we have of course this group from me, but we have a group where Chengisip managed to win his group, and if we scroll a bit to the right, there's also Irene really dominating his group with 36 points, so some players that definitely are among the very best players that we have in this game and who both managed to win the international championship later on. We're here just about to rank up to the Platinum Division. And then if we go further down, we can spot Marta Pecheur winning his Silver Division with 33 points. The reigning world champion at this point also maybe started his tournament experience. Siphon played later on in the Grandmaster division of the International Championship, and we also had a very epic battle because, let's see if I can find it again. I just spotted it when I prepared very quickly. Here in Silver 15, we had a battle between Wavy, Wartzinets, and Endovigan. Wavy being able to also win the Intermezzo Championship one time later on, Wartzinets winning the International Championship later on, and Endovigan winning the first official two-player, or the first official World Championship, which was only consisting of two-player games. So a very epic battle was happening there in Silver 15. At this point, maybe not known to the players, but yeah, definitely a very strong silver group. Yeah, so definitely interesting to see some names. Let's see if we can maybe find some more. SQ, yeah, I played against one time in the World Championship, and he also started to organize some tournaments. The same is true for Snail Zane, and I think both of them organized the Snail Cup, if I remembered correctly. And then we also have Olesh here, who we all know, of course, who all know who are on Discord. And let's see if we find some more interesting players. Oh, we have in Wood one Mayondor, who also just recently won the International Championship, and also Wandering Wolf, and those two players are playing together in the current team championship, and I think they are both from Australia, and maybe started at this point their tournament experience together, both ranking up immediately. Then let's see, Papava is also a player that is a little bit known. I think I played against him in the final of the Australian Open at some point, where Sandwell was able to win. And yeah, maybe you can also take a little bit of a closer look at and see if you spot another interesting name, but I think that's maybe fine for now. Definitely interesting to see that back then some journeys of some players started who then really managed to win some very important trophies. Alright, but now we are finished with the history lesson, and I hope it was somewhat entertaining for you and also interesting to take a look at this old game. And now, then I say thanks for watching, have a nice time, and see you in the next video.